All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back to another wonderful episode. And I'm delighted today to have Rachel Oars as my guest. Rachel is a psychologist, an illustrated self-help author, an art playgroundist, and yes, I will be asking her what that is, a clothing ambassador who loves listening to the beauty in people. Rachel has her newest book, The Relationship Book, a soulful, transformational and artistic inventory of your connective life, releasing just next month in early November. So that's really only a few weeks away, Rachel. So I'd love to start, Rachel, just with a bit about you, about your background, and kind of I like to get people to tell us the story of how they got to be where they are now, doing what they're doing now.
Yes. All right. Well, I would love to talk about that. I think that my background, I'll say quickly, is as a child, the child of me knew just what to do and how to be. The child of me knew she loved being near people and just being like kind and listening and drawing and writing, all these things, and loved colorful clothing. And that's exactly how I've turned out. I mean, and I don't mean to say when I say kind, because I heard myself say that, like, I have all my crabbiness at times and all the things that we all feel. But I do love people and I care deeply about how people are doing. And so being a psychologist felt like such a natural thing to go into. And now I've been a psychologist for almost 30 years. And I'm now 56, but in my early 40s, I really circled back also to bringing back in the writing and the art making of my youth, and have continued to do that in book form primarily. And my love of clothing and creative expression, and colorfully so, has also really picked up during this season of my life as well. So the child in me is quite happy with me. And so I would think those would be the main things.
So I love that, and just coming from the position of I love to work with the 7 chakras, which I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I am.
That decade of, kind of 41 to 51 is our phase of being in the throat chakra, the truth. So, you've really blossomed into your truth phase. You are, shining forth your truth from your heart through that throat phase of, just being you. I love it. That's wonderful.
Thank you. And I love the chakras coincide with colors too.
Yeah. Well, of course you're into them.
Yes.
So did you have a period, I don't know, maybe from your 20s to your 40s where some of that was a bit more shut down, a bit more gray, less colorful?
Yeah. And so I would say 20s, 30s was about, for me, just getting into my career as a psychologist and figuring out, okay, beyond schooling, okay, how do I do this? It's like when people first learn things, you're a little more into the rules. How do you tie a tie? So you're thinking of the distinct steps of doing that and making sure you've got the foundation of what you're doing kind of established and settled. I think I was establishing and settling just the foundations and starting a family. So just the foundation of my life in that way too. And then I think at some point, I think that it was honestly in my early 40s, I had, which is all fine, it was great actually, had a hysterectomy. And, I was done having children, it went well, I'm fine and healthy. And someone asked me, in the place of your uterus, what would you like there? And I said, my creative life to blossom now. And it has. And it's happened in kind of small, wonderful steps. Anything from a pair of eyeglass frames that I would pick out. I remember being in a department store. You know, when you pick out eyeglass frames, you go really close to the mirror to check out, you know, from frame to frame. And I remember I put on these purple and green pair of frames and I would just giggle in the mirror. And then I'd say, okay. And then I'd put on more reasonable frames. I'd be like, okay, that shape looks good on my face, da, da, da. Then I'd try on the green purple ones again. And then I couldn't stop giggling, Arwen. So then I thought, I am not going to argue with my joy. And got that pair. And I'm not saying for everyone that purple and green, you know, eyeglass frames would be it for you, but I think it's paying attention to what is your joy and what makes you feel alive. And that those are tremendous clues into a path led of wellness and joy. And then the other piece that I would just say that I remember as one of my first couple steps was a paper calendar. I still keep a paper calendar when I'm scheduling my clients, but I just always have. I just love that. And so at the time, though, a number of years ago now, I remember I went from just keeping what I thought was a professional looking calendar that was just black on the cover, you know, just had the years, you know, and I thought, well, that's what I schedule my clients with. That's what they see. I look like a real professional. And I remember looking at something called a Mary Engelbreit calendar, which is an artist who's just colorful and whimsical and affirming and just really, really sweet characters and these little vignettes. And so the calendar was full of her stuff. And so I thought, oh, that won't look very professional, but I really want it. My heart feels led to it. And I thought, I'm just going to do it. And so I began a snowball that's really become what I would call my beautiful life.
I love that. And a few things came out of what you've just said for me. First of all, replacing your uterus with creativity, again, coming back to the chakras. And this really was not my intention with this conversation, but, you know, that is that sacral chakra. I like to call it the creation energy. It is our, you know, where our creativity comes from. I mean, obviously we have that innate ability to create new life in that place, but that is where it comes from. So yeah, so beautiful.
Oh, I love that you're tying that together.
Yeah. So first of all, why do you think that it's so hard for so many people in our culture and our society now to, you know, allow themselves or to be able to tap into that place of joy and really make sure, and the other bit is if they do, that we don't prioritize it. What are your thoughts, especially as a psychologist, around that?
Yeah. I think that just even as you ask the question, Arwen, my heart aches a little bit because I think that it is a matter of the heart and the heart chakra. And what I'm thinking about is multifold. That for a lot of people, that's going to mean listening, taking the time to slow down and pay attention and notice what sensations come forward when they make a certain selection. Because to decide to hear if something brings me joy, I have to be in dialogue with myself, don't I? I have to actually let myself get quiet enough to notice, because joy can feel like a range, you know, it can be very subtle, or it can be as all out as giggling or laughing hard, you know, but the subtle can be a quickened heartbeat, right? Or just a little whoosh you feel, and a little sensation in the body. It can feel really also gentle, but it's joy nonetheless. And you have to be connected to your body and listening to do that. And for some people, it's not altogether emotionally safe to be connected to their body because of trauma,
Mhm.
or and so it's a way of they're protecting themselves, right? Or for some people, it's hard to take themselves seriously of what's going on inside them because they grew up with either parents or siblings or friends or peers who discouraged them or made fun of them or treated them like they were invisible, right? All kinds of possibilities. And all of these possibilities don't have to be a dramatic picture. It can be subtle. It can be a few words spoken at certain key times that were really important that stayed with them. And so they learn to sort of either hide or to not want to stand out, or not pronounce or share joy. Like one of the ways I share joy is in my colorful clothing. I hardly think about it anymore, but I am stopped quite a bit saying, excuse me, what is that? You know, blah, 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 or comment on, oh my gosh, you know, what you're wearing. Um, and so you do become visible, whether it's in your clothes or it's in the light you are giving out if you're living out some joy. And I think a deeper question is, do you want to be seen, and what will that mean for you? And if for some reason it's hard to listen to yourself, or you don't quite want to be seen, then what's going to help you to feel safer? Because then it's an issue, it's sort of a deeper issue of the heart, and of really caring for those tender places.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I have recently brought art back into my life as well. And I was just thinking as you were saying that I noticed this week when I was just quietly doing some painting stuff. And I just thought, wow, I just feel so calm, so relaxed. It was like, you know, this real knowledge that I need to do this more, to have, you know, that it was joy, but it was a very quiet joy. Like you said, you know, it doesn't have to be a, you know, giggling madly. It was just like a, you know, I'm just so in my flow doing this.
Yes, that's right.
Mm.
Isn't that something, how creativity, which can take so many forms, including cooking and baking, I mean, right, so many forms, can be such medicine and such a portal to our hearts, to our joy, to regulating our bodies and calming down, and a vehicle to ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point, that it doesn't mean that everybody needs to get out the paints or the colored pencils or whatever it might be. You get into the kitchen, or you get into the garden, or you put on some music and dance, or whatever it is. But we are innately creative. Our cells are creating every day, as one of my teachers says, or, you know, every minute or hour or whatever it is. It's, you know, we are creative.
Yes, exactly.
Have you looked into anything about the psychology of color?
Oh, I have. And it's not all fresh on my mind, but I did do a brief talk on that once. And it was fascinating leading up to the talk to do some research on different colors and their effects, right? And so the ways, just to give a little sampling of things that I remember, because some of the things certainly stay with me, but even things like drinking like, let's say, hot chocolate out of an orange mug will psychologically make the chocolate taste better to you.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Or the colors green, which makes sense because of green being in so much nature, tends to help us to feel more tranquility and calm. You know, the color red tends to jump out at us and energize us. So sometimes you see that in a gym or a workout facility. You know, I could keep going, but there's just these different qualities about color. that absolutely have effects on us.
Yeah. And again, it's about paying attention, because we'll all be potentially a bit different with that, paying it being
Yeah.
quiet and still enough that you can go, what am I feeling about this color? And
Yeah.
and I think we do get to this point, probably in some point in middle age, where you just like, now I just feel like, no, I just want to have things that I really like around me and on me. And, and a lot of that is color. I'm not that colorful today, but I think, it all comes back to that listening to yourself, doesn't it?
It sure does. It's interesting, Arwen, because I was just thinking that I'm wearing a lot of orange today, and orange happens to be a polarizing color. Some people hate it and some people love it. And there's not a lot of people in between. It's like black licorice, with reactions to it. I'm just realizing I'm wearing a polarizing color. So some people looking at me will be like, ugh. And then, it's just, that's the deal.
Yeah.
And blue by far is people's most favorite color. So if you're just wanting to have a neutral, positive effect, so it's fascinating to think about these things. Yeah.
And I think blue's quite calming as well, isn't it? Because there's also there's the green with, like the forest effect, and there's the blue with the water effect. So I think
that's right.
It's naturally calming to us as well.
Yeah.
So please tell us about your book, the relationship book. So, obviously I'd love you to give us some little snippets from it, or whatever you want to do for people to be able to take away some great tips from this conversation as well.
Oh, that would be so great. Well, here is just for those of you who are watching.
Gorgeously colorful. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And so the relationship book I wrote during the pandemic for those couple years. I was so struck in my conversations with people about what we already know, but was so accentuated about how near and dear to us our connections are, and integral to our well-being. And how much for some people, some more than others, but in isolation that began to take place, especially among some single people I knew who were able to work from home on their computers, while of course it was so great they could work from their computer and still work, but being so isolated. And I know for some of those people, they got pets, a new cat, a new dog, whereas they didn't have that before the pandemic. But having connection and relationship, even if it's to an animal, was life-changing. And so it just really was pressed on my heart, Arwen, to speak about and honor relationships, and to be more intentional about them. And so in this book, I have 9 chapters. 3 of them are devoted to our relationships with people, which of course, as human beings, but those people chapters have different themes. So like when we have tension in our relationships with people, that's one chapter. And, but just other themes, right? Embrace, like the lovey stuff. And, but the other chapters in the book are a variety of relationships, starting with our relationship with ourselves, right? Caring for that. And then relationship with food, with clothing, with animals, with community, with divinity. So it ranges. And the last thing I'll say about the structure of the book is each page spread has an anonymous client quote from my psychology practice that took my breath away in some way that they've approved for me to have in here. And then I accompany that with my written reflection that's a little bit prose-like, and then my colorful illustration. And so my intention is to equip the reader with feeling really cared for and supported in them, being really intentional about caring for their relationship with themselves, and in turn with others. And also equipping the reader with maybe some outside of the box new skills or ideas of things to try that might really empower them, lift them up, create more intimacy with themselves, with their relationships with others, maybe even give them some new thoughts about their relationship with their clothes and otherwise. So that's some of what it's about. But I would love to read a couple captions from the book.
Yeah, I would love you to do that.
Okay. All right, one of the page spreads, and I tell you, I'm like a kindergarten teacher with showing a page real quick. So here's one page. This is the purple guy who you're seeing there.
And can you perhaps describe that for people who are listening?
Yes. So it's a little guy. He looks kind of anxious, and I call him the purple guy. And I have him a purple face, purple hair, purple outfit, you know, and he's sitting down with his hands together, like kind of nervous. And this is from the first chapter, Relationship with Myself.
Mm-hmm.
The anonymous client quote, "I've named the nervous part of myself the purple guy, and I'm working on hearing him and being good to him." My reflection. I open my cape and a cast of characters flocks forward, each Emmy awarded and deep heart applauded. There is the purple guy who's always nervous, Gladys, who always feels she must put on a glad face, and Candy, who invariably asks for more candy. There are many others with hands waving excitedly in the air, waiting for their day to be chosen, named, and brought into the fold. These are the parts of me who I laugh with and lounge with, cry with and hold, rest with and wrestle with, reconcile with and release, and do it all over again. Seeing them outside of me gives me a new way to introduce myself to myself. I then seem to show up with better manners, treating myself with more care. At the close of the day, I tuck them in and whisper sweet dreams and tell them I'll see them again in the morning. So that's an example of loving up the reader, right? All the parts of them inside, and maybe giving them a new or different way of approaching themselves. Like, oh, what are some of the parts of me? How can I love up the whole lot? You know, not have to say, I'm scared, I need to swallow that part of me or hide it or compartmentalize it or say negative things to that part of me. No, all my parts are parts to love.
So how do you do that? How do you start trying to love the purple guy?
Yes, I think it starts with awareness. I think it starts with even knowing that's an option. It's kind of a sense of, oh my gosh, when I feel anxious about something, instead of saying to myself, well, that was stupid, or I'm such a chicken, whatever, I have an option that I wasn't aware of before, of holding compassion for that part of me. And I'm doing the best I can. And it reminds me to say that to myself, that there's another part of me who's observing it. There's a part of me observing the purple guy. I can't say there's a nervous part of me without observing it, right? Mm-hmm. And so the fact that I have an observer self says something about, there's also a part of me, the observer self, who can be quite compassionate and quite observant and quite whole. So I would say it just even begins with that awareness and trying out this language and letting yourself be wildly imperfect at it.
Yeah. Do you think the observer self is the same as the judging self, or are they two different selves?
Very different. So I want to see the observer self as really more the wise self. Mm-hmm. The observer self is the wise, compassionate self who's watching all of this, mm-hmm. and that might watch the judgment, you know, or the judge, you know. What does that judge look like inside? And why does that judge need to be there? Because from the observer, compassionate, wise self, all the parts are there for a reason, trying to take care of you, defend you, look out for you. Sometimes the judging self, I think, is also scared.
Mm. Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is an example of trying to give the reader some thoughts. Another page just spread, which I won't read the whole thing right now, in the relationship with myself chapter, has to do with when feeling more depressed, to give yourself let me say it this way. When more depressed, if basic self-care practices don't seem to be moving the needle on the depression, to really consider and brainstorm a list of wild and beautiful experiences to give yourself. Like, go in a hot air balloon if you can and watch the sunset. Go to a friend's door and sing to her. Say a prayer to an elephant. I could keep brainstorming, but have at the top of a piece of paper, put on there, write down wild and beautiful experiences, and just brainstorm a list. What would be things you could give yourself that would feel like that? So that's another example of equipping the reader and the listener, and encouraging you. Some of these pages get a little bit like, most of the pages don't rhyme in my reflections, but a few do. And I'd love to read a lovey-dovey one that is a little rhymey, just to sort of shift it up a little bit. How about that?
Yes, please do.
This is from a chapter, Relationship with Humans, Embrace, right? So this is the more, here we are, the lovey-dovey. And I'll describe it too, but for people who can see, there is, thank you. So it is an illustration of a woman, and she's kind of hugging herself, and it's more black and white. And on one side of her outfit and hair is sort of white background with black polka dots, and the other half of her is black background with white polka dots. And the anonymous client quote is, "I was told my husband and I had multiple lives together, and in one life we were the same person." And here's my reflection. My DNA is spiraled into yours, and yours is spiraled into mine, an inherited, color-coded, cellular design. Our paths are interwoven and our stories intertwined. For where I find your heartbeat, I most certainly find mine. We are two lights, and yet somehow are one. As we walk through this world, you the moon, me the sun.
I love that. It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
So I did want to ask you as well about the fact that your books, and this is the fourth, is that right?
Yes,
yeah,
it's the fourth.
And are they all illustrated? I just wanted to ask you about that. So
they're all colorful and illustrated.
It's pretty unusual, isn't it, for a self-help book, other than having graphs or scientific diagrams or whatever.
And for adults.
Yeah,
exactly. And so, I've got to just tell you, at some point when I was in grade school, I distinctly remember picture books changing to chapter books. And the chapter books seemed to lose all their colorful pictures. And I was seriously bummed out. I grieved that. I didn't mind the stories becoming more intricate, and I loved them. But I was really sad to lose the pictures. This is what I mean about the child in me has informed my adult life and my becoming. And so I thought at some point in my adult life, I am putting colorful books back into the world for adults. Yes.
Yeah. And so what are the other three books? Are they things you'd like to mention as well? Sure.
My first book is called All I Did Was Listen. And it is a book about our transformation. And it's the only other book like the relationship book that has that same format of anonymous client quotes with my reflection and my drawings. But that book is specifically about transformation, starting from all of our messiness inside, kind of the way we wake from dreams with our wrinkled pajamas and our messy hair and our real stories, our dreamy place where we don't censor our stories, leading all the way up to I am who I am, who I am, just really embracing who we are. And so it's really a tale of that. And that's why it's called All I Did Was Listen, because it was just really, it's about listening to ourselves. It was me listening to the amazing things that I would hear transforming in my clients, that I realized this is all of our stories. So that was my first. My second is just a short book called Diving In, that for people, especially who love water and swimming, it's a niche book for them. So it's about going for a swim, but it's a metaphor about this invitation to dive into the water, that when we stand on the edge of the water and look in, while that can be lovely, all the gold nuggets, all the living, all the aliveness is when we swim. That's where all the whales are. We encounter the relationships, things come alive. And so it's this invitation to dive into the water, to your life. So that's that. And then the third one is called The Great Green Okayness, A Field Guide to Seeing Your Uncommon Magnificence. And so that book gives the reader all these different ways to think about their magnificence and their worth, and also outside of the sort of box ways of thinking about that. Just for a quick example, like, that our superpowers are more about when I don't know if you've experienced being called weird at any point in your life, or odd, or like that was weird, or that, and sometimes that can feel shaming. But what I am saying is that those are the clues to our magnificence. That's the twist on it, is that, oh my gosh, when someone says, well, that was kind of weird, I think, oh, that's right. I may have scared them a little bit, but it has something to do with being like very uniquely me. So for me, one of my quote weird things, but not weird, it's not really weird, it's magnificent, is I love to lean into people and tell them all the beautiful stuff I see that in them. And sometimes people can be uncomfortable with that. And I don't mean I don't have boundaries with that. Of course I do. But growing up, finding my way with that and articulating it, that was a journey. And but that is absolutely how I'm built and how I'm meant to proceed in this life. So I just say, lean into whatever the weird thing is. Or the other thing, Arwen, is sometimes in my conversations, people will start by saying, okay, I'm going to tell you something. It's kind of silly, or it's kind of corny, or it's kind of weird. And I always blurt out now, because I'm 100% confident. I say, okay, just so you know, whatever you're about to tell me is going to be the best thing. I just know it. And it always is. Always.
Yeah.
So that is just an example. And this is me like going on, just in a conversational way. But that's like one of the pages in The Great Green Okayness where I say it more succinctly. But it's a clue to your magnificence.
I love that. Thank you. So, and just back to the illustrating, was that something, I'm sure it was, that you felt like for yourself, you just had to illustrate these books, what you were writing, but what do you also think that your readers get from that?
Oh, well, I hope they first of all get joy, and that it also unconsciously or consciously or both brings to the table their own inner child. It brings more of them to the table. And also I think that it can invite a sense of playfulness and something that's light and delightful in the mix of the depth of what I'm talking about in the pages. So it's kind of, it allows the deeper messages to be digested well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's like being given like a sweet hug from, I don't know, like, I feel like in a sweet way, it's not really sneaky, but like I sneak in the deep things. I'm planting seeds of people's like super special deep worth and just some deep things. But I'm accompanying them. Oh, maybe some of it is I'm also giving them good company as they do it, because a lot of the pictures are of these figures.
Yep.
And so maybe that's some of it. I'm giving them companions to be with them as they think about these things.
Yeah. And it just, I guess, it's a different way for the brain to see the information as well, because, you know, we certainly, you know, we started off reading things that were pictorial. So, you know, it's an innate way for our, you know, probably out the oldest parts of our brains to get information and process it as well, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, that's a super smart thought. That is super true. We know it's true. Yes, Arwen. Yes.
We answered the question together.
Yes, we did. Go team.
Okay, I've got to ask you what an art playgroundist is. Like, what's, you know, why don't you just call yourself an artist?
Right. Which I do identify with, of course. I made up the term, and you know what? There's going to be a theme throughout this whole conversation of a child. So making art for me feels like I'm on the playground again, like it's recess and I'm free and I'm running the field with my friends. The wind is in my hair. I may be, you know, having fun on the swings, but there is a real freedom and a connectiveness for me when I make art. That's a similar sensation to that.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And that's a great thing for anybody to tap into as well. You know, I think especially as adults, when we go back to creating visual art, especially, and I'm sure it's the same with any other art form, that you've really got to be aware of that perfectionist part. That, you know, that's like, oh no, oh, that's rubbish. You know, like one of the things I did the other day, it didn't turn out like I thought it was going to, but then I was like, actually, I really like it and I've put it up on my wall. So, you know, it's just that. And if you go to an art gallery, there are things that you look at and you just think, well, why is that defined as art that's, you know, good enough to be on a you know, the wall of a national gallery? And it's just about that element of play. You're so right.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness.
And I know you do a lot of stuff with clothing as well. You obviously wear amazingly gorgeous items of clothing, even if orange is not my favorite color in the world. You're correct.
See, there it is. Yes.
But, you know, I suppose just tell us a bit about that as well. I think you call yourself a clothing ambassador. Tell us about that part of your life as well.
Yes, it's very related to everything else that we're talking about, in that as I was drawing and have been drawing my figures in my books and in individual art prints of primarily women, but sometimes animals and purple guy, you know, sometimes, you know, I've got a couple different guys in this latest book. When I've been doing that over these years, it started to affect my clothing choices. And I started dressing like how I was what I was drawing, how I was dressing my figures on paper. I started over time to dress me. And then the more I would start to dress me in different ways, that started to affect how I drew my figures, right? So I have this art print that I wrote words on that says, I make art and art makes me. That it's very, there is something magical and very real that is co-created there. And so that was happening. And I knew that as a little girl as well. I remember some of my clothes that I loved. And so there's a free to be you and me and how I dress. And there's a freedom also of not worrying what other people will think of it. And in fact, I think that the way I dress blesses people because I'm being myself and authentic. And in fact, a lot of my clients will sometimes say to me, Rachel, your outfits are also therapeutic for me because you are modeling being yourself and free. And also sometimes the colors are also making me simply happy. And sometimes I just look forward to what will she wear next. So I do get that feedback. And so what also happened is that I think it was in 2016, I had a family trip, which was delightful, with my sons and my husband to New York. And a couple different people said to me, Rachel, when you're in New York, you have got to check out the Swedish-based store in Soho called Gudrun Sodin. You are going to just die. You're going to love her clothing, right? So hot tip, Gudrun, Gudrun, at last name Sjoden at 50 Green Street. And Green has an E at the end. I love her clothes. I'm wearing them right now. So it's like,
I love that jacket. It's gorgeous.
And this dress too, but one of the things I love is she will put out a jacket, but she'll have it in 3 different colorways. So this will also come in like a black and a white and then some other color scheme, so she gives options. But what happened is we got to our Airbnb, and this is a happy coincidence or whatever you'd want to call it, but it turns out the store was 6 blocks away from where we were staying, and New York's a huge place. And I said to my family, I said, oh my gosh, as soon as we got in there, I said, I have got to go there first. And so it was the one store I spent the most time in, 2 or 3 hours. I just walked in, I exclaimed loudly, this is my favorite clothing store ever. It looked like all the girls I've been drawing came to life. Like it was my clothing I've been drawing. And the manager came running across the store and said, I heard you. And by the time I left the store, at the end, I was standing in a circle on the floor in the store with all the staff, and I was crying because I loved them so much. And like one of the people working, they didn't have something left in my size, but she was wearing it. It was my size. She said, Rachel, I want to give it to you. And she took it off her back and handed it to me. This is my gift to you.
Wow.
I mean, by the time I left New York, they asked me to be an ambassador for that store, and I still am. And, it's just a tremendous delight. And it's, talk about playgroundist. Like it is so fun to wear the clothes, and I'm so genuine about loving them. And it's part of my creative expression. Oftentimes putting an outfit together is about joy for me. It is about circling back to earlier in our conversation. It's about listening to my heart. It's about taking my joy seriously. It's about treating myself well. It also it's about putting on clothes that feel comfortable. I don't like things tight on my tummy. I like things soft. It's about noticing all those things and honoring myself and honoring my beautiful relationship with myself, because I love me and I get to, and we get to. But it's a process, and it's a process every day with what food I give myself and how I treat myself.
Yeah.
And so it's all those things. And I've also begun working with another clothing designer, Magnolia Pearl, that I love too. That's newer. So that's what that portion of life is. But all the different segments speak to each other. The clothing speaks to the books. It's and speaks to my therapy clients, like they're all friends, but it's about integrating me It's about paying attention to all my parts.
Okay.
It's about, I get to really show up, but it's happened in little steps over the years. It's, when I think about anyone who might wonder, how in the world do I do that? You do it with one decision at a time. You do it with, what socks do I feel like wearing today? Do I want to wear 2 different socks? Do you know what I'm saying? You do it by saying, who's a friend who treats me well, who I might like to reach out to? You do it with saying, well, I always take that boring walk, but where's a place I can take myself where it would be a lovely walk for me? And so on.
Yeah. That's great, because I was just going to say to you, what is the first step that someone can take? And you've already answered that question.
Yes, we're in sync.
I love that about that store. I'm definitely going there because I'm sure I will love it as well.
Oh my goodness, that is so great. Well, if you do mention my name, some of the staff will know me. That is exactly where I will be December 3rd. For anyone who happens to be in New York, December 3rd, I will be at that store for a book signing all afternoon. And then also for people in New York that day who come to my signing, they will get 10% off all their clothing they buy in the store that day.
Okay. Oh, that's
yeah.
So what part of New York is it? What part of the city?
Soho.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Which is such a fun area anyway. Right?
Oh, how fabulous. And do you know the brand Desigual?
Yes, I love that. Yes.
I love
Spanish
that as well. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah.
Gorgeous, kind of similar-ish kind of stuff, isn't it?
Yes.
To what you're wearing anyway.
Yes.
So tell us where people can get your book, and is there anything other than what you've just mentioned about the 3rd of December in New York? Is there anything else you want to tell people about?
I think that's it. I think that, also there'll be refreshments in the store, but again, it's at 50 Green Street, Greene in New York. And I'll love to see you there. That's it. Like that would be so fun. So in terms of finding my book now, it's available for pre-order, and the books will be going out very, very soon. And you can, if you're someone who doesn't like links, that you just prefer to Google things, like just put some keywords in the Google, it would just be Rachel Oz. And its last name is like the first part of awesome. So it's AWES.
So appropriate.
Oh, thank you. But I say it as like a memory thing.
Yeah.
So Rachel, you could Google Rachel Oz or Rachel Oz or Rachel Oz Etsy, ETSY. If you've ever heard of an Etsy shop, there's a million of them, of art stores online. But if you just Google Rachel Oz Etsy, that will get you to my online shop where I have all my books and art prints. But also, if you just want to put in a link and say racheloz.com, at the top, that's my website. And at the top of the banner, you'll find, you can click on shop up there. You can click on my counseling resources or, numerous things. And you can also just Google Rachel Oz Instagram, Rachel Oz Facebook, any of those kind of things too.
Okay, so you're just Rachel Oz on everything. Makes it easy.
Yes.
And will the book be in physical bookshops as well?
Yes. So just now, it's just beginning, right? It's just beginning to establish all the places, but it will be in places just within the United States at this point, unless something else picks it up, right? So if you're outside the United States, I can ship it to you if you buy something online from me, but not in bookstores outside of the US.
Right.
So sorry.
Okay. Oh, well,
I love Australia and the whole wide world.
Yeah. Well, you never know who might be listening and who might get up in Australia.
Exactly.
And there was something else I was going to ask you. Oh, it's gone out of my head now. Oh, yes, that's what it was. Do you work online with psychology clients as well?
I do.
Okay. Yeah.
The pandemic has really, burst open the possibilities, and now it's like part of the norm.
Yeah. Yeah. So anybody in the world could connect with you for that if they wanted to. Yeah. Great. All right. Well, I have had such a fun time talking with you, Rachel. It's been fabulous.
Such a delight. Yes, indeed. For me too. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Oh, you're most welcome. And I'm sad that I'm missing you in New York by 3 days, but never mind.
Can you believe it?
Well, it wasn't meant to be this time, but maybe in the future. So thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom and your color and your joy with us today, Rachel. It was wonderful to have you as a guest.
Okay, it was wonderful to be had.